Do I have your permission to record this interview?
Yes.
Okay. Please start by telling me your name, what you like to be called, your occupation at the time, and then where you're from.
So my name's Robert Jairdullo. Everybody calls me Jay. Occupation is retired police officer. Currently working some security, private security, and an assistant wrestling coach at Delaware Valley University.
Oh, nice. Visited Del Val when I was looking at colleges. That's funny.
Nice.
Your career working in law enforcement, was that always the path that you saw for yourself?
Actually, it wasn't. So I have my undergrad degree is in health and phys ed, and my master's degree is in exercise science. The plan for me was to be a coach, teacher and coach, phys ed teacher and a coach. That's what my father did. And my father, ironically enough, kind of talked me out of it. He said, law enforcement was always like plan B. And for my father, he said, 3 years of being a police officer, I grew up in North Plainfield, New Jersey. 3 years of being a police officer in North Plainfield, you'll make more than I make in 30 years of being a teacher. So that was always plan B. Law enforcement, when I first got out of college, I was substitute teaching and coaching, didn't have a lot of prospects. My degree undergrad was in health and phys ed, but I didn't have this teacher cert. I would have to go back to school. So instead of going back to school, I started taking the law enforcement exams and wound up here in South Brunswick.
And when you were growing up, was the idea of physical fitness, being physically active, kind of what led you to wanting to pursue that career? What was that like when you're in your younger years?
Yeah, so my father, 40 years of coaching. I grew up in locker rooms. He was taking me to practices since I was 5 years old. So I was always around that environment, and then was an athlete myself. Saw a lot of benefits from training for athletics and sports in general. So it was just kind of a passion. Played college football. So it was kind of to me, a natural progression to go into the coaching and the teaching. But from a financial standpoint, not a whole lot of money in coaching and teaching. What I really thought I was going to do was be a strength and conditioning coach, maybe at the college level, and not a whole lot of money and stability in that. It's those jobs, if the head coach gets fired, the strength coach is probably going with them, and you're looking for a new job, and you got to be able to be willing to go, move to the West Coast, move back to the East Coast, and everywhere in between. And I was looking for something a little bit more stable, and law enforcement fit that bill. And like I said, in college, my father encouraged me to major in criminal justice, but I knew it wasn't necessary to major in criminal justice to be a police officer. Gotcha. I knew you didn't have to have a criminal justice degree. Some departments you don't even need a degree, some you just need a degree.
Sure. And then when you were that mindset of obviously athletics, college athletics definitely integrates a work ethic that is different than I think in a lot of other places, depending on what you grow up with. So you said you played where did you play college football?
Westchester University in Pennsylvania.
Gotcha. Was there anything about that mindset of always training, always being ready to play sports that kind of led you to maybe the idea of law enforcement being something that maybe you're always on your toes with, or that you have to be ready at all times? Was that anywhere part of that?
Yeah, I think sports in general prepare you for life, and the fact that, for me, playing Division II football was a bit of a stretch, so I had to work hard to get on the field, right? Like, by most accounts, not too many people believed that I could play Division II football, so I worked really hard on and off the field, and I think that mindset, applies to any part of your life. So I think, my coaching philosophy is life lessons through sport, okay. And I think that influenced how I did my police career and how I live my life.
Gotcha. And with that, I guess, did you, after finishing and then realizing law enforcement's where we wanted to go, South Brunswick, how did that come about?
So another funny story. Prior to taking the police test here in South Brunswick, I didn't even know there was a South Brunswick Township. I don't know, I guess being young and not really knowing New Jersey all that well and growing up in Somerset County, I guess I kind of thought it went from New Brunswick to Trenton, and there was nothing in between. My father had, back then, there was something called the classifieds in the newspapers, which South Brunswick had posted a little 1x1 inch ad for their exam. My father had cut it out for me, and I filled out the application, wrote the check, and I still remember the day where the Starbucks is now on Route 1.
Okay.
There used to be an Exxon there.
Oh, okay.
And the test was given at the middle school, South, at Crossroads South, but I couldn't find Crossroads South. So I stopped at that Exxon to ask the guy, because back then there was no smartphones, no GPS. Well, there's probably GPS, but I didn't have it. Stopped at that Exxon, which is now a Starbucks, to ask where the middle school was, and still made it to the test on time. So.
Okay. And that was probably one of your first times in the area, at least
That was
recognizing it as South Brunswick?
100%. I may have been on Route 1 just passing
Sure.
through at some point, but again, I don't, where I grew up in North Plainfield, we weren't in the same group as South Brunswick, so we didn't play them in sports.
Okay.
I knew New Brunswick, I might have known North Brunswick, but yeah, I had never even really heard of South Brunswick.
Sure. Gotcha. And then obviously you took the tests. Did that went well for the first time? And
So I took the written test, passed the written test. I don't think I got mid-80s on the written test. Then the next step was a physical fitness test, which was again at Crossroads South Middle School. I think that was pass or fail. I don't remember now. And then I got put on a 3-year list, and I think I was number 12 on a 3-year list. In the meantime, I had gotten hired at the Somerset County Jail as a corrections officer. So I'd been there for about 9 months when I got the call from the captain in South Brunswick saying they had got to my number, on the list, and did I still want the job? Told them yes,
Sure.
and rest is history, I guess.
Oh, for sure. When you were getting through with that, about what age, what time in life were you when you started, when you were involved in, when you got into the South Brunswick Police?
Yeah, so it would have been August of 2000, so I was 26 when I got hired here.
Okay.
25 when I got hired at the Sheriff's Department as a correctional officer, and I was 26 when I got hired here in South Brunswick.
When you were brought on to South Brunswick, was there anything in the interim of when you were doing the testing, or obviously with jobs, it's like we're going to take what we have in front of us, but was there anything about South Brunswick and the police department that maybe stuck out to you that stood out?
No, if I'm being honest,
Sure.
in between taking the test and getting hired, I really didn't think about South Brunswick, because when I got the letter saying you're number 12 on a 3-year list, in my mind, and again, I didn't know much about how it worked, was number 12 on a 3-year list, they're never going to get to me. So kind of actually wrote it off as probably not getting that job in South Brunswick, thinking that, they just weren't going to get to me.
Sure. Did you go anywhere, look for any other departments?
I took some other tests. I think I took the Hillsborough test. I think that was it. Oh, I took the test I took the test and got hired, but turned the job down. The New Jersey State Corrections, the Civil Service exam, and then I also went down to Baltimore County, Maryland, and took their test. And all at the same time, the State Corrections, the County Corrections, and the Baltimore County Police Department offered me a job. And actually somebody from the town that I grew up in was the captain at the jail, at the Somerset County Sheriff's Department, so he talked me into taking that job.
Okay.
So I took that job with the idea of working there for a year or two and then maybe start taking tests again, not thinking that South Brunswick was going to resurface.
Sure. What were some of your initial experiences when you were brought on? Any assignments or things that stuck out?
I don't remember, assignments. I still remember my first call. It was a woman on Office Davidson Mill Road was receiving, I think it was Maggie Lane or McGee Lane. A woman was receiving basically crank calls from the Middlesex County Jail. So that was the very first call I was on, and real simple solution. We called the jail and had them block the number of that house from being called from the jail.
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing for me coming to South Brunswick was, I grew up in a town with 2 square miles where, my family was there for generations, knew just about everybody, and if I didn't know them, they knew somebody who knew my family. And coming to a 42 square mile town where, not everybody knows each other, although back then, South Brunswick was the smallest big town you'd want to meet. It wasn't as developed as it is now.
Okay. That's interesting. Yeah, definitely. South Brunswick being a obviously very highly populated area that's very developed now in the last 26 years or so. It's definitely interesting to see that change, and I can only imagine what that's like. Obviously, having grown up here and seeing it more in its current state.
When I got hired here, I told the North Plainfield cop that I was friendly with that I got hired here, and the biggest advice he gave me was, remember that working in a town that big, 42 square miles, your backup could literally be 20 minutes away. Mm-hmm. So he said, you got to be able to survive those 20 minutes.
Sure.
God forbid something bad happens, you got to be able to survive those 20 minutes till your backup gets there. And he wasn't wrong. Mm-hmm. On a busy afternoon at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, if you're out on 130 and Dye Road and the call's at 1 in Finnegan's, it's going to take you a good 20 minutes to get there.
Was the department then, how I'm assuming the department might have been smaller back then. How different was that?
Yeah, it was probably, I think I was the 71st officer to get hired. I don't remember if that meant we had 71 officers on the department. I don't know if that's how it worked. Mm-hmm. But we were probably around that number. And then I would say now, I don't know, I've been retired for 2 years, we're probably in the 90s for officers. So a little smaller department, but not much, and we've fluctuated through my career between that 70 and 90 number. Sometimes we're a little closer to the 70, sometimes we're a little closer to the 90.
Sure. Interesting. So I guess kind of getting more towards our topic of discussion today, you were brought onto the department and our transition into 2001 and the events of late 2001. You were still relatively newish in the experience, and to get right into it, could you kind of walk me through, your sense of being in South Brunswick, being a police officer, and in hindsight now, knowing what occurred on 2001, did you ever think that something of such a scale would happen in the United States in your lifetime, let alone in your law enforcement career?
Yeah. So you're right. I hadn't even been on the department for a little over a year, but I hadn't even been out of the academy for a full year yet. I had graduated the academy in I think like January or February of 2000. So I hadn't even been out of the academy a full year. And to answer your question, I got to say I probably didn't think, right? I think, I know bad things happen, but I think we grow up thinking that these things happen overseas, right? And we're never going to get attacked on our land in America, right? So not sure that I thought something to this scale. Obviously bad things happen everywhere, but something to this scale would happen, and certainly didn't expect, when you get into law enforcement, I tell this to all young people who are thinking about getting into law enforcement, you kind of got to prepare yourself, or at least think about, bad things are going to happen, right? Can I handle that? Not sure that something on that scale was something I thought about prior to becoming a cop. What would I do if this happened?
Sure.
Right. So it was just like for people who weren't in law enforcement, it was a shock to the world.
Sure. So I'm gonna just pause the recording so the cameras don't stop on their own, and then we'll pick back up again.
No problem.
All right, camera 1 and 2. Camera 1's on. Camera 2 is on, and we are recording again. So, obviously introducing that idea, not sure whether these events could occur in the United States, something that seems far off in the minds of people in the United States. Could you just walk me through the day, in any starting point that you can? How did the day start? Where were you? What was that like?
Yeah, I think like most people who were alive at that time, they probably remember exactly where they were when they first heard it. And for me, I was actually, when the first plane hit, I was getting ready for work. I wasn't working my shift that day. I was working what we call quasi duty. It's extra duty jobs. It's the road jobs that you see cops out on. And it was at a Lennox warehouse out on Commerce Drive. They hired us for security back then. And I was getting ready for work, and it was on TV at my apartment, and kind of like saw it, but didn't really register the impact of what was going on. At that point, I know I probably thought, and I think most of the world thought that, oh man, this was a freak accident. Somebody lost their way, right? And by the time I had gotten to work, I believe the second plane had hit. I still got in the car, went to Lenox, but by the time I got to Lenox, they had pulled me off that job, and we had, as a department, had already identified some, for lack of a better term, high target areas in town. I don't know if it's still there. There used to be an Associated Press building out on Commerce Drive, and that was one of the high target areas that they determined. So myself and Jim Stoddard, who he retired as a deputy chief. He might have been a patrolman then, or a detective, I don't remember. But myself and Jim Stoddard were assigned to kind of stand by at this Associated Press building. What I remember about that was that Jim had family that worked at the World Trade Center. Fortunately, pretty quickly they identified that she was not there when, but that was a little emotional to have somebody who was worried about their family being there. And that's kind of probably when it first hit me how serious this is.
Sure.
The rest of the day between then and actually responding into Ground Zero is a little blurry. I don't remember it all completely.
Sure.
I can remember telling my wife at the time I was going in, calling home to my parents, telling them I was going into Ground Zero. Sure. But other than that, the in-between, because I don't know what, sometime in the afternoon we wound up responding to, I want to say it was the Middlesex County Fire Academy in Sayreville. I don't think it was the police academy, to meet with the other Middlesex County police departments that were responding in as part of the response. And then, and I don't know if I'm getting ahead of ourselves here, but then we met there, had a meeting there, and then we all loaded on buses and headed to Jersey City. Once in Jersey City, they put us on a ferry and transported us over to Manhattan to get to Ground Zero. And that was like kind of surreal. Mm-hmm. Having grown up in New Jersey and seeing that New York skyline for years, to be on that ferry and seeing this just dark spot where you normally see the Twin Towers and the New York skyline was kind of surreal. Sure. Once we get to Manhattan, get off the ferry, and this is like right out of a movie for me. This was like, to this day, it still just seems surreal. Streets were completely empty, smoke everywhere, you know, what you would picture for Ground Zero, but there was one guy who was some kind of business worker, right? He was in a suit and tie, but all disheveled, and he was just screaming, "I just want to get home, I just want to get home." And to this day, it almost seems like that was a dream, because it's just so surreal. But yeah, that's the story of me getting over.
Sure. And in that moment, obviously, you were home, and I take it you're probably TV's on, and it just
TV's on. I'm getting ready for work, and
sure.
and all every news channel
flips to that.
Yep.
And you were living in South Brunswick.
Yep. Tara and I had an apartment in Whispering Woods.
Okay. Gotcha. And then I guess at that time you're going to your security position, and obviously pretty quickly they realize where do we go?
Yeah.
The thought process behind seeing what high importance areas in town, was it kind of, obviously no one could prepare for this kind of event locally, nationally at the time. The process of being like, all right, everyone just go here, was it more so just go and be present just in case? Like, because I take it that contingency plans in case of X, obviously we see how it affects traveling now, were probably not as prevalent on that kind of scale in town. Do you think that was just kind of the idea at the time, just send everyone we can to be at the places that we think should be protected?
Yeah, I gotta think, and back then I wasn't involved in any kind of administrative decisions, but I gotta think that on some level, not preparing for something like this, but at some level we knew, the administration at the time knew the areas in town that would be high risk. or they just started brainstorming. Again, I wasn't, as a brand new patrolman, I wasn't part of that decision-making process, but once they realized that it wasn't an accident, that this was intentional, I think probably every department in the tri-state area started doing similar, figuring out where there was high risk targets and sending officers there. And it was just a presence. I mean, we literally just sat outside the building. We didn't do anything else.
Okay. And I obviously at that time, with media being so much different then, and people in town, I'm sure, who were getting up, going to work, noticing what was going on, I'm sure there was a sense that like time kind of slowed down a little bit with just the day to day. People probably people were at work, schools were open.
Yeah.
People were there. Was there anything that, like in the scramble, I guess, of getting to Middlesex County area, that you remember that was kind of different?
I don't remember there being any issue with getting there.
Sure.
I don't remember there being like people kind of panicking in New York City, right? There was a lot of backup and people trying to get out and some people trying to get in. But I think we were far enough away from Ground Zero that we didn't experience that. Okay. I don't remember having a hard time getting to Sayreville from South Brunswick, or even getting from Sayreville to Jersey City.
Sure. Why were you chosen to go to New York City?
No solid good reason, really. I mean, probably the truth is that the sergeant who I worked for at the time was one of the guys that was picked because he was a sergeant and a trusted member of the department, Thomas Clapian, and he liked me.
Okay.
It really boiled down to, I believe we sent two sergeants, Thomas Clapian and Gary Luck. I think they were both sergeants at the time. And I think the administration at the time allowed those two to pick the men they wanted to bring with them. And for whatever reason, Clap thought that I would be a good choice, one of the good choices.
In that moment, there was probably no way to really, they just told you, all right, we're going, you kind of just have to stomach the fact that you don't know what you're going into. Was that kind of just how it was?
Yeah, I mean, but that's law enforcement, right?
Sure.
I mean, that's part of what I said earlier about preparing yourself, right? Mm-hmm. Every day's unknown in law enforcement, right? Some days are going to be crazy, but you don't know until you get there, right? So certainly that there was a heightened sense of, I don't even know what the word I'm looking for is, but there was a heightened sense of maybe like this is something that could go really bad, but this is kind of what you signed up for, right? When you get into law enforcement, and it's kind of a cliche, but it's true, is you sign up to be the person that's running into Ground Zero as opposed to the people that are getting out.
Sure.
That's what you sign up for.
And when you got there, do you, with the local agencies, clearly there was obviously a mass involvement of law enforcement and first responders going to these areas. Do you know how many other local agencies responded at the time, or was it just like everybody pick a few and go?
Yeah, I think I would imagine, and I don't know this is accurate, but I would imagine that every Middlesex County department, we went in as part of the Middlesex County Office of Emergency Management. I would imagine every Middlesex County Police Department sent at least a couple guys.
Okay.
I think we had 6. I know like Plainsboro maybe had 4 or 5 guys. Edison, I remember, sent a huge contingency of guys because they were the last department to arrive, so we were waiting for them to get there to leave. But I would imagine, I think we had 2 full, like school bus fulls of officers, probably 2 to every seat. Sure. So whatever that, I don't know what that number was.
Sure.
But whatever that was, it was quite a few officers.
Yeah. And when you got there, you said you were waiting for Edison if they sent a large group. How did they figure out what your responsibilities would be at that time?
So it wasn't quite dark yet, or just getting dark. So it was probably 12 or so hours after the actual incident. So still a little chaotic.
Sure.
So I don't think there was a whole lot of solid plans.
Sure.
When we got there, it was just we all got assigned to different areas, and our role, I think the intention of our role was kind of perimeter security.
Okay.
Because we all just kind of got sent to the corner of such and such. Mm-hmm. And what kind of happened was, because it was a little disorganized and a little still everybody's trying to get their feet underneath them, is you kind of went where you were needed.
Okay.
One of the things that myself and several of the South Brunswick officers did is actually go further into Ground Zero and kind of help with that. If you have seen any of the videos of like the bucket brigade, like clearing out debris, you know, one of the things I remember is somebody, and I believe I'm remembering this correctly. It's 25 years ago, so but there was a Burger King not far from the Trade Center, and somebody just took that Burger King over and was feeding the emergency response workers out of it. It was just kind of like, at that point, probably not planned. Nobody probably said there's a Burger King on this corner. Go. Somebody probably just said, hey, we need to feed these guys. Fire up the grills and let's get them fed. But there was a little bit of, I don't want to use the word disorganization, but a little bit of we, the collective we, were still trying to figure out what the best plan was.
Of course, and obviously there's such a large scale of law enforcement there. I can only imagine the prep. Obviously, there's lack of prep in that situation, but there's how do you even respond immediately to that? It's make sure people are okay, making sure the area is safe, making sure nothing else is going to occur.
I would imagine that even the people at the Port Authority Police, although they're prepared for not to this level.
Sure.
Right. It was probably above and beyond what anybody ever thought to be prepared for.
Sure.
One of the biggest difficulties I would say for back then was there was cell phones, but not smartphones.
Sure.
And with everything that was going on, the cell service was bad, so there wasn't a lot of good communication. Right. Our police radios don't work in Manhattan. Right. So.
Sure.
I think one of the disconnects between the six of us that were there and the administration here in South Brunswick was the lack of communication.
Okay. And in that moment, the six of you, were you together primarily most of the time, working together?
For the most part, yeah. For the most part, I be honest with you, I don't remember if we all originally got assigned to the same intersection, but we were fairly in constant contact.
Okay.
We never, if I'm remembering correctly, nobody ever ventured off by themselves. It was always at least two guys were together, right? I think, again, I think I'm remembering this correctly, but I think the two sergeants, Glapp and Luck, basically told us nobody goes off on their own. If you go anywhere, you go with somebody else.
Sure, and in that moment when you guys are maybe potentially being together, were you interacting with people leaving, people confused, asking questions? Was there?
Yeah, at that point, other than that guy that we first got when we first got off the ferry, most of the civilians were gone. We're out of the area, right?
Okay.
I don't remember once getting down to the actual Ground Zero ever interacting with civilians. There was just a lot of other first responders.
Sure. So I guess to restate, when you got to the Ground Zero area, was it the immediate site of the World Trade Center, or the blocks nearby at the Ground Zero area? Today more people I think associate with the site of the buildings. Was that where you were at the time? Okay.
Yeah. So originally the intersection we got assigned to was kind of like the perimeter, but when we kind of went to see where we were needed, we were at Ground Zero. I mean, you see pictures now, and I don't know, Building 7. I don't know what I see pictures now that I can. Oh, that's where we were. Mm-hmm. And that Burger King, if I'm remembering correctly, was right there.
Okay.
And it's just kind of, again, surreal. I know I keep saying it, surreal scene.
Sure.
Fire trucks just left in the middle of the road, overturned cars. It was like something you see out of a movie. Something that I never thought as a law enforcement officer that I would see.
Sure. And I guess too, like you mentioned, something you'd see in a movie, even a depiction of such an event in the United States, I think, in a science fiction movie or something, like we don't even have the idea of conceptualizing what that could be because it's so out of left field.
Right.
And so I can only imagine what that was like in being in person. And you mentioned like bucket brigade responsibilities. Was that like cleanup part of your responsibility as well?
So there was no I don't ever remember other than being assigned to this intersection, and basically I think the assignment was perimeter security,
okay.
Right? And there was never, it wasn't organized to the point that they were assigning people. It was just kind of like, oh, let me get in line with this. And I specifically remember one guy, I don't know if he was a fire, at that point he was no longer in uniform. He had on uniform pants and a t-shirt, and I just remember him like calling me over and handing me a bucket and just kind of going from there.
Sure.
So it wasn't like anybody was even in charge at that point. It wasn't like there was a scene commander or
Yeah,
anything. It was, hey, lend a hand where you can.
Okay. And about how long were you present in the city?
You know, we weren't there maybe 12, 18 hours. One of the things that there was because of that breakdown in communication, and the people back home couldn't get in touch with us, they brought us back.
Sure.
Which, you know, if I could go back, I would have liked to have done more.
Okay. Was the when they brought you back, was there a sense that they were maybe rotating people from other areas in the tri-state area coming in to help out with things to make sure no one was there for 3 days in a row because there was nowhere to go?
No, at that point, to be honest with you, I think they brought us back because there was such an overwhelming response.
Okay.
The people who were in charge of the logistics didn't know what to do with everybody that was there.
Sure.
I think at that point they were and this is all kind of a guess on my part. The people who, you know, the Port Authority, the New York NYPD, the NYFD, they were the ones calling the decisions, and there was such an overwhelming response of departments from New Jersey and the surrounding area that I think it was just too many people at the time to plan the logistics.
Sure.
We actually, the PBA, in the weeks to come, sent guys in, and in that role we were support. We were literally on the outskirts. And what we would do is there was four-wheelers, the state PBA, I think, provided four-wheelers, and you would hop on a four-wheeler with some coffee and some food, and you would go around to the workers. At that point, it was probably a lot of steel workers.
Sure.
And just make sure they had everything they needed. So for that was a rotation of South Brunswick guys. It was a voluntary thing because it was through the PBA, but.
So you went back a second time?
I was back several times, after 9/11 with that detail up through the PBA. Okay. Again, that was a total support. We were off scene from ground zero and had to hop on a four-wheeler to get to ground zero and bring whatever they needed in there for them. But I think that effort was mostly coordinated through the state PBA and our local PBA.
Okay. Coming home after the initial response of being out there, could you walk me through what that was like coming home to South Brunswick, not right now from the law enforcement side, but the interpersonal side? Like, who did you come home to your family? Who did you speak with? You know, I don't have a good recollection of even making it home, right? Okay. So at that point, probably been up for about 48 hours. I would imagine I came home and showered and went to bed. What I can say is it affected me. Mm-hmm. It affected me. It's not something I love talking about. Sure. Obviously. Sure. No, I totally understand. Just if you need something. No, I'm good. Thanks. Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you. But you know, it was again, no matter how much you prepare yourself for law enforcement, you know you're going to see traumatic things. That was, and I listen. I didn't see a whole lot. I didn't do a whole lot. There was people there that were there a lot longer than I was, that saw a lot more than I saw. But I think just the sheer devastation of it, not just of the buildings and just the loss of lives, makes it difficult for me to talk about. I don't enjoy, I've never seen documentaries on it. I don't read about it. Sure. Obviously now in the sense of you're being home and you're going back in support roles, your responsibility in South Brunswick, were there any immediate changes as far as the township's responsibility to responding to these kinds of events? I was told, you know, garbage trucks in front of the municipal building, all of that. Yeah. What was that like? What was anything immediately right after? Yeah, I mean, I think almost immediately the administration implemented, I think they called it the terrorist task force, and I was not part of this terrorist task force, so I can't speak too much about it. But how it affected me as a patrolman is this terrorist task force came up with high target locations, and they rated them like a color rating, like the green, orange, yellow, and we as in patrol
were responsible for checking these areas. If it was a red area, which was a high risk area, you had to check it, a couple times a shift. If it was like a yellow, you only had to check it once in a while. But they did put a lot of measures into, because we didn't know what was next, right? I mean, at this point, something happened that we never could imagine happened. So, the department, the administration, the town took every effort to protect our town.
Sure. That was more the short term kind of, I guess short term in that the response of right after the event. How long did that period go on for, checking the areas in town?
If I'm being honest, probably longer than it should have.
Sure.
But in an abundance of caution, it went on longer than it should have.
You don't know
Right.
at the time.
Yep. So I don't. It was at least I bet a year, if not longer, that we had that terrorist. I forget what the list was called, but the list of locations we had to check.
And obviously that included, you mentioned the AP building. Were there any other areas that maybe are different now that were on that list? That you were
I think I remember the Islamic Society being an area, right? That we considered high risk and that we wanted to keep an eye on and make sure everybody was safe.
Yeah.
I don't remember the schools.
Sure.
Were the typical places that you would guess, the religious institutions in town.
Sure. Places where people are going together generally.
Yep,
Sure.
Yep. I don't remember any specifics like something like the Associated Press building.
Okay. Gotcha.
It was more kind of a general religious institutes and schools. And
Okay. And you said that period may have gone on for more than a year. When you were checking these buildings, was it just being present, going through, talking to people? Was there like a plan to do that?
Yeah, a little bit of both, right? So if it was a higher risk area, the expectation was get out of your car, be present, talk to people.
Okay.
If it was one of the lower risk locations, it might just be a ride through the parking lot.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah. It's just, I think it's interesting to see the responsibility, because I mean, I know we can definitely see how the law enforcement presence at areas like that today, it could be sitting in the parking lot for the day and being present when an event's going on. I know, even like here at the library, we'll do the same thing, or National Night Out. Obviously, it's a police-sponsored event, things like that, or a township-sponsored event, so it's good to have
and listen,
people there.
Sometimes those things are more to make the people there comfortable, right? Like, it's not so much that the world revolves around South Brunswick and we're going to be the next target. It could happen here, right? And it could happen anywhere. Mm-hmm. And it's just as much to keep them safe as it is to make them comfortable. And
so I guess my question about, was there any involvement as you, after you're still, relatively new into this experience being in South Brunswick Police, as you continued in your career, was there any involvement, maybe stemming from this experience, that you were in where you were looking into how to best prepare for township safety, or is that just more general things, how to help secure a large group event, or how to be present at X? Was there anything that maybe related to how to respond to this?
It's funny. I don't know that I ever thought of it like that throughout. I mean, obviously, as I moved up the ranks and I was a sergeant lieutenant, part of my responsibilities would be to prepare a action plan for, like, say, the fireworks or something like that. And although there's similar threats that could happen, I don't know that, and it's kind of maybe ironic because I was one of the guys that responded, that I ever took my experience at 9/11 and at Ground Zero and applied that to like the fireworks or National Night Out. Right? Obviously, we do planning for those, and we have planned for attacks and bad things to happen at those things, but I'm not sure that I ever applied my experience at Ground Zero to those.
Obviously, I think, maybe if you asked officers today, maybe, I'm sure in their experiences, depending on where they are, they probably have to go through some of those because of this as a precedent.
Oh, sure. The police work in general changed, and the awareness of terrorist attacks probably at the local level changed a little bit, right? I don't think maybe, like, I don't remember in the academy ever really doing all that much, if any, training on terrorist attacks. I'm sure in the academy now they probably talk about it a little bit. I'm sure police departments train with that idea in mind, and a little more than they did before 9/11.
Yeah, I think I know, and I know some members who are some close friends of mine who are first responders as well, and they've mentioned to me in their class, like in their they're firemen, but they mentioned in the X class, they're like, come up with a plan if X happens at such a large place that you have to go be involved in. And like you said, it's probably was not as prevalent, even on a local level, to be ready to be responsible for those kinds of areas.
Yeah, and listen, there's something called the Incident Command System, and that was created by firefighters, and it's for large-scale events. I don't want to say like this, because again, there was nothing like that, but it is for large-scale events and how to handle large-scale events, and we do, and I don't know, again, I got all the Incident Command training, but it was way post 9/11. I don't know how the Incident Command System changed after 9/11 compared to before 9/11. But there's, your buddies that are firefighters can tell you that Incident Command, there's a couple different levels. They probably know it much better than I do, because it was created by firefighters.
Okay. That's interesting. And that's another good question. When you were going back in support, or even in your initial responsibilities there, were you working with other types of first responders in that moment, or was it mostly law enforcement in the secure the area kind of thing?
Yeah, I think going back in with the PBA, I think it was mostly other law enforcement. I'm sure there was other departments there. There's, I would imagine there was volunteer fire departments that were sending guys into Ground Zero for months after, from New Jersey, volunteer fire departments from New Jersey months after the incident.
Sure.
But as far as I remember, that was mostly a police,
Okay.
state PBA kind of run function.
And as kind of rounding out this this discussion, did your experience in the early 2000s, did this influence your thought about where you lived, your career, what could change for your career as you continued in this career? Was there anything in your personal career that could have been shaped by this experience besides just being there? Maybe the future.
Right. I don't know. That's a good question. I do remember at some point early on in my career, and this is going to be news to some of the people that see this, is considering going to the Port Authority Police, because of the devastation they experienced that day, and the number of officers they lost. They had a huge hiring run after that, so I did consider. I think I took the test, to be honest.
Okay.
To be honest with you, so some of my bosses at South Brunswick might be surprised to hear that. I don't think I ever told anybody that, but I took the test and obviously didn't take the job. But that was the only thing, and it was because of the devastation that they received from a police department standpoint, and maybe being a little bit more involved in not stuff like that, and preparing for stuff like that. But that would probably be the only, and again, it didn't come to fruition.
Yeah.
But
And on the local level, the responsibilities of local law enforcement, obviously you start to have to integrate, like we said, new ways of preparing for things. Was there anything else locally that you felt stuck out in any way that it could have related to, in your experiences responding to these events?
Not from a security law enforcement standpoint. Obviously I think the kind of memorials and stuff that go up, that's something that I think is important, and I think South Brunswick has done a good job with honoring. I mean, just this project here, right? You're honoring the 25th anniversary of the incident, and you want to document our involvement as a town and how it affected our town, and I think South Brunswick does a really good job of that, and I think that was something that, if you were alive then, and for a short period our country really came together. Mm-hmm. And I think that still happens if you talk about it, if it's the anniversary, if there's a memorial. I think although there's a lot of separation in the world these days, I think still here in America, when the 25th anniversary of 9/11 happens in a month or so, we're going to come together as a country again. I think that's a great thing.
I totally agree. For my last question, is there anything else that you would like to share?
No, I appreciate you doing this. I appreciate you including me in the project, and I look forward to seeing the end product.
Great. Thank you so much.